Since there is a good chance that the cultural knowledge of Hyperborea and Atlantis was obliterated, at least its last remnants, in very recent time, then what about living survivors? Of course, in one sense, all of us we are, but what about proper ones that remember much more than us? Well, I'm not sure if there are any left, but in case they are, then the first place to search for them would be Siberia and the Ural Mountains in particular. First of all, the legends of that place say that the people who lived here and were wiped out by that war were not wiped out completely. Very few of them survived, and then they went into hiding and started living underground. That certainly corresponds to the current situation there. There are underground tunnels. This is an example. This photograph is taken by Nikolai Subotin. So this is in place that is far away, absolutely far away, hundreds of kilometers far away from any modern infrastructure. There is no history of mining over there, and supposedly no history of any human habitation ever. Then what about the extensive network of underground tunnels? This one is closed by a wall, clearly an intelligently made wall with mortar in between the stones. Who built all this? Now, in other regions where there is history of mining and even modern mining goes on, over there the reports are actually similar. This is a modern mine, but the interesting is that when miners, and not only one case, it happens regularly, when they make their tunnels, they often meet tunnels that they don't know anything about. The boulder that you see in the middle of this tunnel is actually placed there to close a large opening that opened so that people don't fall directly in the abyss below. And this abyss below is so vast that what the miners reported, the modern miners, is that when they put their flashlights, they try to see the end, they can't even see the end. It's so big. All this is accompanied by a very good number of very reliable eyewitness accounts that they hear voices of people having conversations in these endless mysterious tunnels, and even sometimes mysterious sightings. So the conclusion from all this situation in Ural is somebody that we don't know much about lives there. How many races? Are there any survivors amongst them? That we don't know for sure. And another incident from decades ago, communist time, also may have a relevance to the topic at hand. It's about Soviet geologists who was traveling by helicopter and had an accident, fell on the ground, but did not die, and was saved by a village of very strange people, strange to him. First of all, they were extremely beautiful, and everybody looked very young, even the so-called old people. They healed him, helped him to recover after the helicopter crash using only natural ointments. And when he started coming to his senses, of course, his first thought was to contact his family and relatives and tell them that he is fine, but much to his surprise, in this village, they told him, well, we don't really maintain any connection with the mainland. And then the language of these beautiful people was also strange. They definitely spoke Russian, but it was some very archaic form of Russian. Well, I'm not including all details of that story, but I will include the end of it because that was the most impressive for me. At one point, helicopters started circling, Russian military helicopters above the village. Everybody suddenly got extremely nervous. The elder of the village told him to come with him. He'll drop him somewhere and tell him how to reach the mainland. but they couldn't even get there because just outside the village, people with guns were browsing the forest looking for somebody, and the elder started hiding, and the geologist was totally confused. What's going on here? They were all the time like as if next to them, and then something very strange would always happen, and they would like go around them or not notice them, or they would just hide in some impossible way, and always as if those people passed on their sides and never encountered them. So this was extremely strange situation for him, and he asked the elder what's going on. The elder told him that actually these people are our enemies. They are fighting with us since very long time, but they cannot harm us because I am protected by an extremely powerful magician. Anyhow, to keep it short, at the end almost the full village was massacred. The elder told him how to reach the mainland and then sat under a tree and died. Well, this is what the geologist says, that he died. I personally doubt it. I think he made it look like that. He just left his body temporarily to create that impression in the geologists, most likely. Now, this makes sense now when the Hyperborea topic is coming up again in Russia, but it certainly was something very weird to narrate a few decades ago in Russia. But it's not, I don't know if it is true, there is no guarantee, but I don't see why not. After all, villages in other places in Ural were discovered at that time, where people just decided were just living, you know, without connection with the mainland. Maybe they were not that different as the geologist describes the beautiful inhabitants of his village, but still they were absolutely isolated. But there is hope, according to legends. It's very interesting. These old pieces of wisdom say that when the heroes of the people I have labeled as survivors, the heroes in the past, when they were dying, they were actually only falling asleep. That's why they wanted their bodies to be carefully placed and not cremated, but not really buried, but placed in places which actually in Russian sound like places for long sleep. And that's because they intend to wake up again when the time comes of the final battle between the forces of the dark and the survivors, or at least their party, including those who will fight for their values of goodness, freedom, and honor. Now, this may sound somewhat far-fetched, especially for people who watch a lot of TV, but looking at it realistically, it is not. And here it is why. Lama Itigilov is certainly not the only recorded case of people who are actually alive after they supposedly die, but he is certainly one of the best examples. In year 1927, he decided it is time to go, and he gathered the other monks. He was the leader of this monastic order at that time on a national level in Russia, and told them to start the chanting the prayers that are appropriate for the time when one leaves the body. They were perplexed because he was in perfect health, and they refused to start chanting. That's why he had to start only himself, and shortly after that he appeared to have left his body in perfect health and without any signs of sickness. He also left instructions that in a certain year he has to be reinstated again, and that happened in 2002. The monks unearthed his body, which was extremely well preserved after spending all this time buried in this box, and according to his instructions placed him in the temple He left those instructions because he knew about the coming earth changes, and he said that he wants to be present at that time and help people during this transition. He left his body exactly before the start of the communist repression against religion in that region. And because he knew the future, he also requested to be reinstated again in the future when those repressions would be over and the year was correct. Exactly before the time of religion oppression began, and then in his instructions he left the exact year when this will end and he can be unearthed again. Both times he was right. Now, after so many years after his death, his body still functions pretty much well. It reaches normal temperature of 36-37 degrees. It perspires when it's hot, so they have to change his clothing often. And a couple of years ago, tests were carried on his body by the hospital team in the city. They tested his nails, hair, blood, skin, and everything was pointing towards samples taken from a living person and not a dead one. The Lama also left behind himself a tremendously valuable heritage of volumes of writings, including predictions, which unfortunately are not yet published, not available to the public. But don't worry, we have a full record of the boyfriends of all pop singer stars with horns on their heads, so it is not a big problem. And I remember something else along these lines. I heard it from the remarkable Indian yogi Shailendra Sharma. So he was saying that in extreme antiquity, when the civilization was still advanced, cremation was the normal thing to do after one dies. And mummification or burial practices or any other method of preserving the body to some extent would be done only in cases when the person plans to use his body after his departure. And of course, one knows what is he doing, has the skills to do it. So gradually, as people degraded, they started imitating those burial practices and started burying people, even such people who don't know how to use their bodies after departure, just to show respect to them or naively expect that they will be able to use their bodies after departure, although they don't know how to do it. In other words, simply imitating the ritual without understanding its practical meaning. Now, all over this Hyperborean region of Siberia and other places in the world, they are sadistom in precarious positions as if they are to fall down, and also menhirs like this one. So the academics assure us that these were simply places of worship. Of course, if your father was a primate jumping for bananas, what could you do except stare at a dead stone and stupidly worship it? But Nikolai Sobotin, who visited the area and actually studied it, reached completely different conclusion. He thinks that especially the menhirs are simply road signs, so to say. They are not idols for worship. Pathway signs would be even more correct. Just simple objects for orientation if you are traveling from one village to another, they will point your way. And since he's visiting the places regularly, unfortunately he noticed and very intense recent activity, so to say, on this topic means the network of menhirs and sadas is being systematically targeted and destroyed at this very moment. This is not some vandalism done by drunk boys. This is somebody who really goes in the fields, knows where are these things, searches for them, it's not easy to find them, and destroys them. So some of these sadas and menhirs could be still road pointers for the races that currently inhabit the region. Why not? And here I would like to mention a series of books that many people have found profoundly inspirational, and they are based on the theme of the survivors. These are the Anastasia books of Vladimir Megre. He managed to inspire thousands of people to return to normal life. He is politically active. He is trying to introduce the almost forgotten laws on government level, the laws that every human being should have the right to own a piece of land of the planet that he is born on. In Ukraine, he already has some success, and many people have managed to obtain such land for free from the government and build their own eco house. Building of straw is not such a fire hazard as you are being told. There are natural insulations on the top. It's actually an extremely effective and cheap way to have a wonderful home. So Megre suggests a very simple and practical concept. Give every family at least 4,000 square meters of land so that they can be self-sustainable on it. And they must have this opportunity for free, each and every one of us. Although the books are profoundly inspirational for many people, please be aware that the character in them is fictional. Anastasia doesn't seem to be a real person. In the description, there is link to a free PDF file that you can download and read, but please be aware, take this material for what it is. It actually is a compilation of the thoughts of uncomplicated and simple person on spirituality. He portrays his character Anastasia as quite a powerful and skilled shaman, actually. And yet, what she says in his books is often childish and naive. I noticed in the books a lot of stuff that simply could not have come out of the mouth of a shaman of such magnitude as she is supposed to be. Now, certain groups of people in this, especially this Siberian region, not exclusively though, decided that after all it is not a good idea to accept this new paradigm of life that was forced upon the society by the parasites in the form of perverted Christianity and so on. And they stuck more to their tradition. They're called staroverai или старообрядцы in Russian, which could be translated as old faithers, people of the old faith. Now, for many current citizens of Russia, this would be only a religious denomination, and let's say it would manifest in participating sometimes in events or rites of some sort. But there are still groups of people for which it is a way of life, and quite a peculiar one. The most strict ones still lead quite secluded lives, let's say, they would live exclusively on their property. Maximum once a month they would go to a nearby city or town, maybe to buy something. They avoid any contact with any government institutions. They know that they are obliged to get a passport at one point, and they do it. And when they get home, they simply burn it as a symbol of their intention not to get involved with the civilization much. So I'm talking only about the very strict villages. Of course, there are different degrees of that. But in the very strict villages, if an uninvited person goes, usually people will not even talk to you. They would silently continue their agricultural pursuits in their gardens, but they will not be willing to share things with you. So possibly they could be a valuable source of genuine historic information. For example, they still use the old calendar, according to which the region has more than 7,000 years of history, because that's the age of calendar they're using. But since they're not willing to speak much, we don't really know. But a very interesting piece of information surfaced from their domain some 4 years ago. The story goes like this. This is Alexei Kungurov, a very normal and simple Russian chap. So he visited a very strict village of these old fathers, and he had a recommendation, so they agreed to talk to him. And they were casually browsing historical topics, and they were mentioning, yeah, the history is all screwed up, all is fake and all that. Both parties in the conversation, they knew that. And then the old fathers mentioned, by the way, yeah, and that war 200 years ago, they killed, I forgot the exact number of, was it 32 million people? They bombed us with nuclear weapons. What? Said Alexei Kungurov. 200 years ago there was a nuclear war and it killed millions of people belonging to the old faith. Well, this is crazy, he thought. This simply cannot be. I mean, people can forget, but they cannot forget that much. But after a few days, when he went home, he thought, well, of course it's nonsense, but there is no harm checking, right? So we have internet now, and he posted a few short messages somewhere on the internet. Does anybody know anything about that? And much to his own surprise, many people started contacting him, and now with the research that he has been collecting for 4 years, I can definitely say he is up to something. I definitely can't guarantee that all the scenarios he's proposing are correct. Some of them could be partially correct, but anyway, in the description I have left a link to one of his videos where he measures the actual radiation level on one of the craters, so to say, that resemble exactly the aftermath of a nuclear or left by similar weapon explosion, maybe not exactly nuclear. Basically, he found many such craters, especially in Siberia, last place where Tartaria was alive. Not all round formations would have such origin, but some of them look exactly like that and do have radiation exactly in the epicenter. Others don't, but even Hiroshima and Nagasaki don't have any extreme radiation levels nowadays. They're currently populated, so it's normal. Radiation disappears with time rather quickly. And this, by the way, is a possible explanation for the very young forests in the region. Do you remember that all the forests are some 200 years old, and on the periphery where the forest did not get destroyed, at that time it shows there were some strange years because the circles of the trees that survived that are very strange in that time. So also connecting all this with the remote viewing results that I mentioned in the previous episode, it is possible that the climate 200 years ago and before that was cold in Siberia and windy, but not covered with ice. And this ice that we have now is actually nuclear winter as a result of such possible bombing. And then the nuclear tests that we have been carrying out with the hardworking people, with our taxes and funding them, those could have contributed, because it's really a great amount of such nuclear tests and explosions. They could have contributed to extending that nuclear winter. And now this testing has somewhat subsided, I hope. So this warming of the climate could be simply getting back to normal. All this certainly sounded extremely weird to me when I heard about it a year ago, but not anymore. After all, we had unknown strange weapon-like action in Moscow in that time period. Also in the previous episode, we saw the fire tornadoes in America caused by drafts, believe it or not. So all this doesn't make it look so strange anymore, actually. Well, it could be partially true as well. For example, in the remote viewing results from Marvari, probablefuture.com, they said that there was a dense population, but it was destroyed by violent hurricanes, and also there was a visual of a comet. Well, God knows what kind of comet was that and what kind of tornadoes. Maybe those were the fire nuclear tornadoes, like the ones in America tossing a train hundreds of meters away. And also, it seems many people have found craters with radiation in the middle. I guess the official explanation they always give is nuclear waste. Okay, I understand somebody could have dumped nuclear waste anywhere, but what? Were they also digging circles around with diameter a kilometer sometimes, or even more? I doubt they have been digging that. Well, these are the plus points of his hypothesis. The minus is the manner in which Kungurov presents his research. I have heard a lot from him. He really looks like an honest person, which is, I think, the most important quality. But on the other side, he tends to get carried away, to quickly assume things. He is unable to present often his research in a easy to listen fashion. So that is why I exercise caution in accepting his hypothesis. One would think that if there was really such an international nuclear or nuclear-like war 200 years ago, I mean, people would notice even on other continents. Well, probably they did. I'm reading. The weather in 1816 was unprecedented. Spring arrived, but then everything seemed to turn backwards. As cold temperatures returned, the sky seemed permanently overcast. The lack of sunlight became so severe that farmers lost their crops, and food shortages were reported in Ireland, France, England, and United States, along with famine. It is not by chance that that year is called a year without summer. Its description is one-to-one nuclear winter. And again, the most suspicious and strange thing is at that time people didn't know what's going on. I mean, the ones that were alive, certainly. And only after 100 years, the historians, of course, figured it all and said that it was some sort of volcano in the southern hemisphere that caused all that. But I find all this extremely suspicious because volcanic eruptions of similar magnitude did not produce anywhere close effects to this, year without summer. And yet that explanation is presented as some sort of undisputable, absolutely established truth. Well, and then just have a look. What were people writing at the same time in Europe? George BYRON, famous author. Supposedly at that time he was on vacation in Switzerland. God knows if it was really a vacation or something else. So he had a dream, which was not at all a dream. The bright sun was extinguished and the stars, rayless, pathless, icy earth swung blind and blackening in the moonless air. The inhabitants of all things which dwell were burned for beacons, cities were consumed. Now this could have something to do with possible events 200 years ago, but it could be misplaced because we know that the dates of the medieval history are pretty much confused, but also they may be connected with other space battles. Medieval people witnessed many of those, most famous one being of course the Nuremberg, when the full population had plenty of time to watch real space wars of spacecrafts above their heads. And here starts the next chapter of my narration, called The Current State of Affairs in terms of the war between the human race and the parasites. Well, the current state is as follows. The human race has adopted so much the ways of the parasites that we barely need any external help anymore, and we perpetuate this foolish, crazy life mostly by ourselves, driven by parasitic beliefs that we accept as axiomic, self-evident, and absolutely valid, although they are nothing else but an artificial matrix. Also, people have been asking me again and again, who are the parasites? Why are you not giving details? Well, I'm not giving details because there is plenty of work published by others already. The best one you can find online. Just type in any search engine the words "revelations from an EU official." EU means European Union. And now I'm so extremely excited to announce an award that I want to give to the topmost contributor to my educational mission.
And first place, please applaud the winner. It is NASA and the full project of the International Space Station. who produced hairdos worth billions.
It's very important to understand why NASA got this award, so pause this video and please do watch the video that is in the description. It says reason for the award and below is the link. Now, when I first watched this footage, at that time I was assuming that this is really filmed in space, and that's why I found it very odd that she had put a styling gel, or I don't know what exactly she has done to fix her hair in this weird position. So I noted that, but just for a second I thought, well, it must be some sort of silly, yet another ugly fashion. Maybe she tries, to look something like Medusa. Because normal hair wouldn't behave in this manner in space. It would flow all around in the air, very similar to what it would do, for example, in a swimming pool. But then I watched the video explaining how exactly they were faking the images of the so-called International Space Station, and because they are using some environment that imitates zero gravity but cannot hold the conditions constant, these actors get like jolts. They actually perm their hair or put gel or whatever fixing substance so that it stays like this all the time, and when they show it on TV, people will think that these people are actually in space. This is another female, again supposedly in space, and her hair is absolutely fixed. Again, you will see on the videos in the links in the description. Do watch those videos, please. They contain analysis of NASA's so-called space footage. This woman usually does not look like this. She herself claims that this hairdo is a result of having no gravity in space. It's not a hairdo, according to her. How silly would it be to allow this afro puff entangle in all these cables and in this way pose a safety threat for the full international scam station? If it was really in space, this would be extremely dangerous. Now in the description I have a very long list of links that you can watch through and see the proofs for yourself, and that all these space missions, or at least many of them, are surely fake, or at least what we are shown is fake. This doesn't mean that the missions don't exist as such. They could possibly exist, but we have no clue what's going on there. Some of the links that I have included in relation to NASA are very much into this flat earth theory. I don't want misunderstandings, I don't endorse that theory. And I'm giving the New Earth Educational Award to these space agencies because they're doing such an excellent job perming the hair of actresses to make it look that they're carrying out scientific research in anti-gravity conditions. Finally, they're letting the world know what they are. Barbers, that's what they are. This is sick, this is so cheap. How long do you want to continue to live in the imaginary matrix of the barbers? As long as you continue to listen to the mainstream media, TV, and entertainment of the barbers, you have no choice but to live in their matrix. Don't fool yourself that, for example, watching sentimental movies made in Hollywood has nothing to do with this. It has everything to do with this. Even if you think that there is no science mentioned in the movie anywhere, so it is safe, it is pure feelings or something like that, emotions, it doesn't work that way. Also, your emotions are being programmed by the barber artificial cruel matrix. Humans can get scammed on such a grand scale to participate in senseless wars from which they gain nothing, simply because since childhood they are exposed to such scenes on TV. If they were brought up like real humans, with the idea that when somebody else in the neighboring country has a problem, that is only a reason to go and help him. It is not a reason to go and start bombing innocent people. And as far as the scientific academic department of the barber matrix, that is not limited to history only. Equally affected areas, means absolutely rotten, are physics, medicine, anthropology, psychology, economics, and many others. If you wish to live out of the matrix of the barbers, first of all, you have to sever your connection with their mass media. Get your information of what's going on around from the alternative media, although that is also very heavily infiltrated by barbers, and it will be even more so in future. And although many of us still don't know what to do with their freedom, means they're completely disillusioned with the barbers, they don't believe them even a word, but still continue to act according to belief system that they assume is natural, just because, simply because, most of the people still live according to it. This will go away. Gradually, as we come back to our senses, we'll gain our capability to distinguish between the lies and the truth. And meanwhile, I will tell you how to distinguish between alternative media that wants to uplift humanity and alternative media that is just barbers dressed in New World outfits. If somebody is showing you a practical way how to awaken your dormant magical powers that are inbuilt in your human form, and is showing you how you can practically model your destiny instead of telling you to believe any sort of books just because they are this or that, or teachings. He is your true benefactor. The dressed up barber will tell you to go and fight for establishing the divine rule of this and that order of angels and galactic federations of goodness. And you have to believe him because he comes from the highest realms. Just believing. Dressed up a barber will also scare you of high-tech, all-powerful aliens who can take full control of your mind and control you from distance, and you have no independence and you have no access to divine spiritual activities because they have blocked it with some whatever way. It is essential to understand and remember that anybody who is talking to you about fighting for establishing any type of central ruling power is taking you for a ride. Or to put it in more simple terms, stop watching your TV, get your news from naturalnews.com and start doing some yoga maybe. And for those who wish to remain and live within the belief system of the hairdressers, there are sweet perks. You can print your own driving license for satellite. That is on the official NASA site, and it is not as useless as you may think, because the nuclear stations that you're funding with your taxpayer money, sooner or later will turn into Fukushima sites because the amount of nuclear waste grows exponentially, and there have been no arrangements made of how it could be taken care of in cases of natural disasters or economic ones or ecologic ones. And at that time, while your friends die horrible death on Earth, you can ride the clouds with your satellite driving license, very much like the NASA pig in the skies.
Yeah, man. Make it possible.
You're waiting for a bearded man, dangerous bearded man from the other side of the world to come and nuke you, but the solution is already here. You have built the nuclear power stations with your own money already, so what are you looking for? And then with pinpointed attention, you see on TV how the bearded man beheaded 40 of your people with swords. But why are you looking for more of this by going abroad? It's already happening in even much more cruel fashion in your own country, in the hospitals. And by the way, the physical pain, the physical torture inflicted by the vaccines upon people cannot compare with the momentarily pain of being beheaded by sword. In case of the vaccines, the death is slower and much more painful. But all this nonsense is going to gradually disappear as people become more self-aware. It cannot happen suddenly. There is no revolution that can help. Even if the centrally governed parasitic rule is removed, the relief that people will experience will not be much because they will continue to act in the old belief system, thinking that nothing else can exist. The gradual transition to the new paradigm, to the divine belief system, has already begun in some parts of the world more actively than in others. Edgar Cayce predicted that the new paradigm of light will start spreading from Russia, but not Russia as a country. Specifically mentioned that he is not talking about the government of Russia. And now I want to show you a few practical examples that make me think that this is happening already. Guru Prokopenko made a documentary on the subject of the practical involvement of aliens in earthly politics. It consisted of footage of high-ranking people of the caliber of generals, for example, talking about it in their own words. Now, that's barely a news by itself, but the surprise comes that this documentary was aired on the prime government channel of Russia in prime TV time. It broke all records in terms of size of audience. When the president of the country speaks, he doesn't get that many viewers as this documentary got. Now please don't get the mistaken impression that somehow or other Russian people are given somewhat more freedom of speech and information by the central authorities. It is the other way around. The central authorities were forced to allow more freedom of information. How exactly? It didn't happen by shouting at the demonstrations on the public squares. It happened because the belief of the public, at least the belief of very large percentages of the public in the hairdresser lies, faded to such an extent that simply nobody believed them anymore. It is as simple as that. Nobody was believing the hairdresser lies anymore, so there was no need to broadcast them. There were no viewers for that. People refused to function in that stage reality portrayed by the hairdresser lies. In many other countries, still, large portions of the population continue to imagine that the governments have at least some shame and are doing at least a little bit to benefit the public, and believe that governments are elected by the public, and because there are still people who buy it, they produce TV and radio shows anchoring people even stronger in that fake reality. Unfortunately, people are getting even beheaded to produce more dramatic and emotional video footage for that staged reality. Another example, now in the most recent history textbooks of the Russian schools, they are already mentioning that all this story of Genghis Khan is a kind of a theory and not really something like an established historic fact. Why? Well, because people educated themselves with the help of the alternative media, and simply even the children know that these are total lies, so they had to change the textbooks to have some credibility at least. Another example, this is Viktor Efimov. If you read his biography, he is a professor in a few fields. This is a doctor, Viktor Efimov. He has been on high-ranking government positions since communist times and still is. And then just listen, what kind of statements is he making in public? It is not by chance that the shamans, the people with special abilities, have been the leaders of society since the time of Atlantis. As the society digressed, the bloodlines of these extraordinary priests and shamans were also broken. Most of the knowledge was lost, and so was their position in the society. But some of us carry till date the genetic material of those priests and shamans. Genetic material can be carried by many generations in dormant form before becoming manifest. And now that the time has come for those shamans to again gain their rightful positions as leaders of society, that genetic information starts manifesting. In some, it is very much conscious. For others, it happens on subconscious level. Wow, and this is said by a government official. In most other countries, this is stamped as New Age crap straight away, and whoever said it is labeled as fringe and quack and so on, and people believe this. They have been trained pretty much like dogs to associate the word shaman with the crack and scam. And this has even further implications, because people who inside allow double standards, they hear all that and think, oh yeah, so that's how it is done. And they become this type of quack scam shaman, because that's their concept of what shaman is. Stereotype image artificially implanted in the heads of people by countless TV programs, all designed by the hairdressers. Next example, on the most popular prime channel of Russia, there is a TV show called Chernobyl. It is a contest for people with special abilities, aka shamans, and they are being asked to display their abilities in a most practical way. It has nothing to do with those standard interviews that you usually see in most other countries, that somebody will say how he has access to the fourth, fifth and seventh even dimension without providing any proof of it, and then wrap it up with a few very general New Age ideas, and that's it. No, people in this contest were expected to show and channel information about people and events that they had no prior connection with, didn't know they exist even, and they were tested. It had to be real and confirmed. This is actually a giant leap away from the staged fake reality of the parasitic belief system. Delving further along these lines will directly empower humanity with the tools to model its own destiny, and with the tools for unveiling true scientific knowledge. But true science is something entirely different, not like the current academics who perm ladies' hair to add validity to their science. And one more example, the discovery of the star batteries technology. This came, let's say, a decade ago on Russian TV. This technology is very similar to solar power, but is many times more efficient. First of all, it functions even when there is no sun and even at night. with really minimum light. And then the storage capacity of these star batteries is far superior than all we know. And on the top of everything, it is not difficult to manufacture, it is relatively very cheap. At that point, they were already talking about a commercial model appearing on the market within the next 2 years. It has been more than 10 years and people are still waiting for it to appear on the market. Indeed, I think it's a miracle that we even heard about it in the first place. So, what can we do practically to help such inventions reach the normal people? We can do a lot. Many of us are members of political parties or various social syndicates and organizations of any type and description, social ones. The main job of the majority of these is to deviate the attention of the public from the actual problems using small talk. For example, they create social tension and even sometimes wars over insignificant problems like wearing burqa. The burqa as such is nothing more than a rectangular piece of clothing. Yet, with the help of the burqas, they make the main problem out of focus. What is the main problem? Crime, violence, war. Why these things exist in our society? Because you can find people who will buy this, who will somehow or other decide to do such things. And why can you find plenty of such people nowadays walking the earth? Because that's how they're brought up. They're brought up with the belief that if you don't agree with somebody's opinion, the response to that is to go and kill him or hurt him. And this paradigm is firmly cemented into people's consciousness by the hypnosis of the television mainly. Countless tests conducted by the psychiatrists have proved monkey see, monkey do. When you show things to children on TV, they just tend to imitate it. It gets imprinted in their consciousness for a life. It's true for the adults as well, although to a lesser degree. And yet you will never hear all those heads of international peace organizations supposedly working for peace to propose any measures against this force feeding of poison to the minds of the kids. Also, you will not hear them mention any of the tests proving that there can be correlation between group meditations and lowering the crime levels. This has been demonstrated already a few times. So what I mean is we are members of these organizations. We should increase the awareness of the other people who are also members to the point that it will become very difficult for all this to be ignored by the leaders of these organizations, and they will be forced to take some action about it. Many people feel like victims living in a cruel world without much choice than to be a part of a rat race that they don't approve. For example, a single mother from Russia, I don't remember her name, no money, children needed this and that, no job, deplorable living conditions. Looks like a desperate dead end, but what she did was, with her last money, she bought just a simple solar panel connected to bulbs. She didn't have money for a full installation, and she went in the woods, made a straw home, straw and mud. This is not her actual home. That was hers was somewhat simpler, but yet very cozy with lovely tribal feeling to it. So she lives very well now. She eats much better food than anybody in the city. She schools her all own children, making them real humans. She's got a spacious property with amazing views. And she's got amazing friends because that forest has other similarly minded people living here and there. And by the way, the first wave of such settlers, they were especially inspired by the Anastasia books. They were kind of hippie type, new age people. But then the second wave came, and those were the type of people that get the label of intellectuals attached to them. Or these solar cars, what's written here? Future energies. How can this be future energies if the commercial models are ready for manufacturing since so many years? Well, they're so simple and easy to make that so many people make them actually at home. And when this becomes widespread, then they will be forced to give us commercial models, which be to start manufacturing them. There will be no question of suppression anymore because so many people drive them already. I don't know, I never stop getting amazed how millions of people can be members of political parties that they consider of some sort of value, must be if they are members, and yet nobody of them raises the question of the solar cars and the fact that they are being suppressed by various organizations that are actually created to promote green energy. Under the banner of promoting comes regulation, which in essence is suppression. And now a few words about the resin incense that has been used throughout history, and in the old books we hear that people were getting cured just by the smoke. The shaman would come, smoke you up, and cure you. Well, we have been told by the barbers that this is just a naive belief, nonsense in essence. Now, in a research laboratory in Moscow, they took the oldest recipe they could find in the oldest Bible. It had 4 ingredients of preparing a mixture of such resin, and they made a test. It turned out that by regularly introducing smoke in the room of the patient continuously throughout the day, they cured 7 out of 10 people sick of, I forgot the exact name of disease, it's deadly disease, infection of the liquid around your bowels. This is a serious viral infection for which any barber doctor will prescribe surgery, of course. The comments of that research group were quite interesting. They were amazed that what they were expecting to find, now they started asking what's the magical thing about this smoke. And it turned out that when the 4 types of resin burn, usually they would be expected to produce 4 different type of smoke, which would be mixed, but this was not the case. When burning, they were making a completely new substance that doesn't even have even a name, and that special new substance has this healing effect. It's a very strange mixture, 3 different resin instances from various locations in a strict proportion, and all that mixed with something like a ground shell of a very rare animal, something like that. That's the 4th ingredient. I mean, who would think ever experimenting with such a thing? I don't know. Certainly doesn't look like something that could be accidentally discovered by primitive people. Why am I including all this? After all, of course, this was not introduced in the hospitals. What is the practical benefit of this? The practical benefit will come when a big enough percentage of the people become aware that such options exist and start placing the question and pressuring government authorities. Ancient knowledge is not lost. It only stands by and waits for us to implement it. And one last example, illustrating that currently we barely need any external parasitic force. We're perfectly able to perpetuate the parasitic style of existence by ourselves. So it seems some million of American students took to the streets to demand free education. According to their words, there were people in the society who are hoarding its resources, and they throw only peanuts for the ordinary people. So far so good, but here comes the question, how can this be realized practically? So far so good, but the answer of the students to this question unfortunately revealed the depth of their ignorance. They think it can be achieved by increasing the taxation of the rich people. But what does this taxation has to do with the actual individuals who are hoarding the resources of the world? They're above law, they don't pay taxes, they create the legal formulations of the law, and they have of course left doors in these laws to avoid taxing. I think even children know this. They do it with offshore accounts, double bookkeeping, donating to charities, so-called charities that are actually parts of their business. This is very well-known fact. So the solution proposed by the students not only does not address the very root of the problem, but on the top of that, it can make their own future even worse. Because the taxation that they are referring to affects only the honest taxpayers, not the ones that are hoarding the resources on the top. And these honest taxpayers happen to be the last sensible people in America, hardworking, who have managed to still keep their business before being swollen up and its share taken by the market corporations. So these millions of students unfortunately have no clue in what kind of financial environment they spend their life. They do not understand the flow of money, and that is why they will be always perplexed. Oh, why am I in debt? Why am I in financial trouble? Because you don't understand the world that you live in. Because you need to sit for a few hours and educate yourself. Your teachers are not gonna educate you, at least on this topic. Some of the other practical stuff could be true. But about economics, they will only repeat what they have heard from others who happen to be barbers by trade, not economists. These millions of students, they are shouting on the streets. 1 million students, instead of addressing the root cause of the problem, they shout on the streets, I want to live in prison. Just give me slightly bigger prison cell. This one is too small. Well, God fulfills everybody's desire. If you want to live in prison, you will. If you want to get out of prison, now that is a different question. That will not happen by fighting with the other prisoners and trying to take some of their food. There are no armed guards keeping you in a miserable prison. The shackles that keep you are your own beliefs. When you start educating yourself, you can just walk out at any time. In the case of the students, they actually do have the power to make changes because there are so many of them. They just spend a couple of hours or a couple of days educating themselves of how the financial world functions. They will find the root cause. The full system is rotten. The full system needs to be changed. It's unfair, it's stupid, it's suicidal. The full thing is designed to feed few parasites on the top. If these students understand what is a fair financial system and what is fair money and present their demands very well formulated, then they will gain many millions of supporters, not only from US, but from all over the world, because the US financial system practically encompasses the world. And all these millions of supporters will start pressuring a great number of social institutions. After some time, the pressure will escalate to such a degree. I'm not talking about shouting on the streets, that's silly. I'm talking about presenting very reasonable demands, well formulated, and submitting them to the actual institutions that need to make the changes required for a transit to a fair monetary system. Shouting on the street is not much different than an insane person talking to himself when nobody hears him. The institutions that need to make the changes will only make it at gunpoint. Means when their very existence starts becoming questionable due to the escalating social pressure led by the desire for honest money. Why the simple and effective plan that I just described has not been implemented till date? Well, many people are even unaware that they haven't received correct education. They were under the impression that they have been taught science, But now, NASA and the International Space Scam have given us such an amazing material exposing how much value is there to that science, the barbar science. I think now we have no excuse. We need to sit down and start actually educating ourselves. And educating not only about the financial world, but primarily about who are we and where did we come from, why are we here. And then last but not least important, there is a link in the description to a video by John Taylor Gatto. This is so important. Please consider that video part and parcel of the survivors documentary.